San Jose State continues to be the doorway to the heart of global innovation. What we learn together now will benefit our community when we welcome everyone back to campus. SJSU, Silicon Valley's public university.
Welcome and thank you all for attending our town hall on San Jose State's Adapt plan. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of the land on which we sit. We acknowledge the land on which we are meeting today as the traditional home of the Puichin Ohlone speaking people and the present-day Muwekma Ohlone tribe. The Puichin Ohlone were missionized into both missions Dolores and Santa Clara. The present-day Muwekma Ohlone tribe is comprised of all known surviving Native American lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay region, who trace their ancestry through the missions San Jose, Santa Clara, and Dolores, and the historic federally recognized Verona Band of Alameda County. In the Muwekma Ohlone language, Chochenyo, Muwekma means the people. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land. Now, hopefully you've all seen the San Jose State Adapt website, and in the next hour, we'll highlight some key aspects of our plan. As a community here at San Jose State, but in truth across our nation, we've been facing tremendous challenges these last several weeks and indeed these last months. We're dealing with the global pandemic, shelter-in-place orders, reopening orders, tightening orders, constantly changing, issues around economic distress and disparities, and very powerfully, challenges around systemic racism against our communities of color. Against this changing backdrop, we've been working to develop a four-phase approach for the safe return to campus. And I'd like to thank and offer just our deepest gratitude to all those San Jose State staff members who have worked so hard on this plan. It is complex and there are many challenges due to the changing guidance, the different levels of guidance, and frankly, the unprecedented nature of the pandemic. Now today we'll highlight San Jose State's hybrid model for teaching and learning for the fall semester and the process for safely returning people and programs to campus. We've got a few introductory comments, but the majority of the time will be dedicated to answering your questions. So I'd like to thank all of you who submitted questions in advance. We'll do our best to get to as many of these as we can, prioritizing those that affect most, if not all, of our campus community. And any additional questions that you have, you can submit to us separately via our website. I'd like to emphasize that the safety and health of our students and the entire campus community has driven our SJSU Adapt plan, and we are looking to continually evolve it and change it as circumstances change. Now, I'd like to remind everyone that we are recording this, this town hall, and it will be available and posted on the San Jose State Adapt website. So for those who haven't been able to join us today, please let them know that they can reach out and they can see it that way. Now, before I hand this over to Provost Vincent Del Casino, I'd like to mention a couple of just brief housekeeping items. To submit a question for the Q&A session, please click on the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar. And please note, as I said, that we're recording today's session and it will be shared on the Health Advisories page on the San Jose State website. So I'd like to introduce now our Provost, Vincent Del Casino, who will kick things off with a discussion about our teaching and learning plan.
Hi, everyone. Well, it's really nice to be here and to see so many people engaged in the conversation today about where our campus is going. I want to talk about just a few of the key highlights of what the campus teaching and learning plan will look like this fall, and really set up for you how your learning will operate for you. I want to begin by saying, defining this hybrid campus model. What this hybrid campus model means is the majority of our classes, almost 90% of them, are going to be taught remotely, either in fully online synchronous, which means you'll meet together often, or some of them may be asynchronous, where you'll work on your own and then come back together. There will be about 10% of our classes, which we've determined are really, from a teaching and learning perspective, really important that you have that hands-on experience. They'll be split face-to-face and online for the most part. We have very few classes that are meeting, for example, in the very traditional face-to-face model. And this isn't really at the core of this, is to make sure we protect the health and safety while managing the most important teaching and learning aspects of our programs. So what you're going to see is a lot of those in-person experiences are going to be in science and technology, dance and art, studio classes, and then some graduate courses as well. Nicely, the catalog and the course schedule are completely up to date, and you can see exactly how your class is going to be taught by looking at that there. Now, there have been a few questions about, well, what does this mean for me? Because we have different communities and populations here. And for one of the big questions, international students. Right now, international students can take courses fully online from their home country as well as from here. There are some rules, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go through, and I'm sure there's some questions. But big picture is the catalog is designed to meet international students' needs as well. Now, for those in-person classes that we do have, very importantly, Santa Clara County has outlined key protocols that will have to be adhered to in any face-to-face experience. That includes managing physical distancing and wearing masks. And that will be applied to not only the students, but the faculty and the teaching assistants and so forth in these courses. What's critical about this is each person has to, in order for this to be effective and to work, everyone has to be a key member of a community and see themselves as part of that community. And these basic practices have been shown to really mitigate and reduce risk for the transmission of coronavirus. And so we're going to be implementing these, which means you won't see the classic lab class where all 25 students are in a lab. We will probably have 5 students in at a time. So really paying attention, if you're a student on this call, to your syllabus and how that schedule is going to work. Asking lots of questions to make sure you understand it will be really important. So in addition, of course, there's a lot more that goes into the teaching and learning plan of the campus than just the classes. And the critical issue here is to understand that we'll have the availability of student support programs in both face-to-face and online environments. Our writing program, for example, our writing support program, you could work fully remotely, but we may have some workshops and things like that where the same Santa Clara protocols will be available. Now, in order to get ourselves ramped up and ready for this teaching and learning plan this fall, as many of you know, many campuses switched quickly in the spring, only had 4 or 5 days to really switch modalities, to move from face-to-face to online. This summer, we've had over 1,000 faculty, however, participate in an online summer certificate program in 3-week blocks where they're really going in and thinking about how do they work across these different ways of learning. How do they take face-to-face and really translate it effectively into an online space and so forth. And I think what you're going to find is an amazingly high quality teaching and learning experience this fall at the university. So I think with these kind of core decisions put in place, I think we're really well prepared to deliver the same high quality degree programs with the same learning outcomes, which is critical to all our students. And so while being committed, while doing this, we're going to be committed to making sure that all our students, our faculty, and staff are as safe as possible. So with this now, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Tracy Ferdeloge, who's a Senior Associate Vice President for Facilities Development and Operation, who will share a bit more information about the ADAPT plan for returning to campus.
Thank you, Vin, and good morning, everybody. As we prepare to discuss the eventual return to campus, it is important to first remind you that we are in phase 2 of the 4-phase SJSU Adapt plan. Phase 2 calls for only essential staff to report to campus, with telework being highly encouraged. All other employees need permission from their supervisor before coming back to campus. The 4-phase plan does not move in a straight line. We could move back to phase 1 if the county public health guidelines call for a full shelter in place, like we experienced in the spring. SJSU could also move to phase 3 as county guidelines change and allow for more people to be on campus safely, although telework would continue to be encouraged. Any move from phase 2 to 3 would be gradual. Employees and students would not be expected to report the next day or in a week. Looking ahead to welcoming more people on campus for the fall semester, there are several protocols that SJSU has put in place to keep the campus community safe. The university requests that all students, faculty, and staff self-check for symptoms associated with COVID-19 before coming to campus. The symptoms for which the CDC currently advises you self-check for include a cough, fever above 100.4 degrees, chills, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, muscle or body aches, a sore throat, a new loss of taste or smell, stuffy or runny nose, diarrhea, headache, nausea, or vomiting. If you feel sick or have the symptoms I just mentioned and cannot attribute them to some other cause, you may not come to campus. Employees, including those who are at greater risk for contracting COVID-19, may exercise use of available leave programs for which they are eligible. Information about leave programs is available through university personnel. Face coverings are required on campus whenever indoors, except when alone in a floor-to-ceiling office with the door closed shut. Students will not have to wear a mask if they are living in university housing and are in their apartment. Face coverings must also be worn outside if it may be difficult for you to maintain 6 feet of physical distancing from others. The campus community is encouraged to wear their own personal face covering, but be advised that the CDC recommends reusable cloth face coverings be properly laundered after each use. The university will also have disposable face coverings, hand sanitizer, and gloves available at multiple locations on campus. Additional cleaning supplies will also be provided as requested. Employees are also expected to sanitize their own workstation regularly and clean any shared equipment, such as keyboards, remote controls, and the like. We ask that you do this before and after each use. As more people make their way to campus in the fall, it is important to remind you that FD&O and Environmental Health and Safety have been collaborating with departments across campus to proactively walk workspaces and campus locations to ensure the university meets county, state, and CSU guidelines and the individual needs of specific spaces and departments. As a reminder, the employee repopulation will take place gradually. The health and safety of the campus community is our highest priority, and we are taking steps to ensure that whenever Spartans arrive back on campus, that they will feel safe. I would like to now introduce Lisa Molora, the Vice President for Strategy and Chief of Staff, who will be leading the Q&A portion of this town hall.
Thank you, Tracy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. I'd like to remind everybody that you can submit a question through the Q&A button at the bottom of your toolbar. We received a large number of questions through the registration process, and many of those concern the recent message from the CSU regarding layoffs. So although this town hall is about the SJSU Adapt plan, President Papazian would like to open the Q&A session with these questions. President Papazian, to begin, what is the administration doing regarding potential faculty and staff layoffs due to the state budget cuts? And is the CSU considering offering a Golden Handshake which encourages faculty to retire for added pension time?
Thank you for the question. And I know this has been on so many people's minds, given the messages that you've received from me and from Chancellor White. And it's a tough time. Here's what I can say. Our commitment is to protect the employment of our staff and faculty as fully as we're able. We've been doing some really careful thinking about how to balance our budget given these cuts. And we can talk more about that a little bit later. I know we have some questions on that. This will require, of course, our going deeper into our reserves in order to address it. And we are looking at ways to do that. We anticipate that we have things set up so that we can resolve this year without having to move toward any significant layoffs at all. So we will be looking at this on a case-by-case basis. The key driver here is to maintain our enrollment of students, because if we have stable enrollment, we'll have an active, fully engaged campus, whether we're remote or in person, and that will mean that we'll be able to continue to work with all of our employees. So our commitment is to you in every way possible. And I just want to share as well that when I met with the Labor Council, we had a really good conversation around this. And in some cases where there might be a lack of work, if there's a way that the skills that those individuals have can be used in another area where there's need, we're certainly going to look at ways that we can do that. So our commitment is to you, and we'll be doing everything we can to ensure that you continue to work with us. Regarding the Golden Handshake, this actually came up at the Board of Trustees meeting as a question. And I know this is something that would be handled through the Chancellor's office, working with CalPERS, which is our retirement and pension system. It's a little bit complicated because we don't run our own pension system, but I know it's something that they have as a consideration. I don't think it will be, we'll be seeing that anytime soon, though. I think the work will be done to try to make it, make things work without that.
Thank you. This next question is for Joanne Wright, Senior Associate Vice President for University Personnel. Are furloughs still being considered? What are other cost-saving options like shutdown days, temporary layoffs, and voluntary retirement?
Okay, well, so furloughs are system-wide. They would be system-wide, so it would be determined at that level in consultation with CSU unions. Chancellor White's message of July 20th stated there's no plan to negotiate these this fiscal year, but they may be necessary next fiscal year, so that's 2021 or 22. Now, as the president highlighted, we will consider various ways to work with budget challenges while doing our best to protect employee job stability. This may include voluntary programs, and we would discuss this and other options with our unions as appropriate. So as we go along, we will consider all of our options available to us.
I have another question for you, Joanne. What will the prioritization be for layoffs, and when would they start? Can you also tell us how employees would be notified?
Okay, so as many of you know, there are layoff protocols in our CBAs. So generally, the order of layoff will begin with hourly, temporary, and probationary employees, followed by permanent employees in order of seniority. And there's notification requirements that we would be required to follow, obviously. The notice would be provided a certain number of days in advance of actual layoff. And in short, we would follow all of these required protocols, including the appropriate notifications.
Thank you. This next question is for Charlie Foss, Vice President for Administration and Finance and CFO. When is the 2020-2021 budget set to come out? And what have been some challenges in curating it, given the impacts left by COVID-19?
San Jose State, our budget process is to work through the late spring and summer to craft our budget and to publish that early in the fall semester, and it gets presented to the Academic Senate usually in the October timeframe. We don't see any issue with meeting any of those deadlines. Now, with the budget, we're faced with some really extremely difficult challenges. As the president's alluded to, the state's significant budget reductions, the impacts from the pandemic, and the resulting mix of enrollment, changes that's going to lead to shortfalls. And so we are working diligently to make sure that all the needs and desires that we have from Transformation 2030 are being met. That's our guideposts as we go forward.
Thank you. I'm going to read this question directly as it came in, but feel free to speak to what you believe the question to be. How much budget reserves did SJSU take on from the CARES Act? What are some of the things that those reserves could go to?
So San Jose State got $28.8 million from the federal CARES Act. Half of that money, 14.4, is intended to go directly to students, and well over 90% of that has already been distributed to students in the spring. The remaining 14.4 is going to be used for COVID-19 impacts on the campus. The university has not drawn that money down as yet, but fully intends to. Examples of usage is going to be instructionally related expenses. Some of the academic work that Vin talked about earlier that's happening with our faculty this summer. Housing and parking and dining refunds that were done in the spring semester. COVID-19 cleaning and maintenance expenses that are significantly over and above what we've had before, and resulting IT expenditures that we're seeing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Charlie. And I have one more question for you. Is the moratorium on non-essential travel because we are eradicating our travel budget?
No, absolutely not. This is all based, a couple fold. It's out of the chancellor's office, so the chancellor has said across the system, non-essential travel will not be happening, but also it's counting guidance as well, and it's common sense, I guess. We are reducing the amount of travel. There'll be abilities to have some limited exceptions to that. Some research-based items, some other areas that will require either the president's approval or your vice president's approval.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Joanne. President Papazian, I'd like to keep you for just a moment and start to transition to questions about the SJSU Adapt plan. With COVID cases rising in California, why are we returning to campus?
Well, it's a great question, and it's something that we have to think about every day, and we do. What is the best path forward? And it could change. So what we're presenting today is our best sense of where we stand right now. We're only partially returning to campus. As you heard from the provost, 90% of the courses will be held remotely, and so it's really a small number that will be on campus. And as Tracy also explained, right now it's only essential employees who are expected to be on campus. Most are working telecommuting. So we expect to have actually a fairly low density going into the fall, and we will adjust it as more information comes forward.
Thank you. And what can you tell us about whether SJSU will plan to operate in a remote or hybrid environment through spring 2021 semester? And when might we know?
Yes, with the way every week seems like a month or several months right now, I'm not sure any of us knows exactly where things will be when we go into January. So what we're trying to do is plan for the worst and prepare for the best. I think we all recognize that the probability of a vaccine being widely available by the start of the spring semester is very small. There's some promising advances that we read about every day, but these things take some time. So it'll be a while before we have that. Our intention is, and the chancellor signaled this as well the other day in one of his interviews, that we will plan to, we'll be prepared to go into the spring in the same mode as the fall, knowing that it's a lot easier to bring people face-to-face than to go from face-to-face to remote. And we'll know a lot more as we get further into the fall. We thought, of course, that by July we'd be in much better position, and we find things have worsened. It could be that when we expect them to worsen, they might, if everybody follows protocols, we might see an improvement in our circumstances. So we'll be asking ourselves that question every day. But as I said, we'll plan for something similar to this fall, and hope that we can actually bring a little bit more back to campus as time goes on.
Thank you. Final question before I turn to the provost for a set of questions for him. You've alluded to this already, but could you speak specifically to your sense of the possibility that we could move to campus phase 4 by the end of the fall semester?
Phase 4, that would be very optimistic. I'm an optimistic person, but I think that would be unlikely. But I think if it were possible, we would all be relieved. I don't think we can expect that.
Thank you, President Papazian. I have several questions for Vincent Del Casino, Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs. Vin, let's start with a set of questions about a hybrid semester. What will a hybrid semester look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, for the most part, again, what we mean by hybrid right now is looking at the whole campus. So if you look at the entire catalog of classes, the majority of them will be remotely taught, which means you will not have a face-to-face experience in them. And that's about 90% of them. Some of those classes, and you'll see it in the catalog if you're a student, says I'm going to meet Tuesday, Thursday at this time, because they're going to have face-to-face meetings remotely. Then the other 10% of the classes will have some level of on-the-ground in-person experiences. And as we mentioned before, those are largely going to be in the science and technology areas, in the art, dance, and music area. There's some in kinesiology that we'll see. But for the most part, everything else will be done remotely. And our student services will parallel that.
Thank you. I might follow up on that. Some students asked, can they take all of their classes fully online in the fall?
The answer is for the majority of the students, they will be fully online in the fall because that's where their courses are going to be. In some cases, for example, like the business college, all the classes in the business college will be remotely taught in the fall. So if you're thinking of, am I going to stay home? Do I need to move to San Jose? If you look at the course catalog, it's pretty easy to manage a fully online fall semester, both if that's what's most comfortable for you, but that's what's available in your various degree programs.
Great, thank you. And then one more question about these hybrid or online courses. This is new for many of us. So can you tell our students in particular, since many classes will be online or virtual, will those classes still meet online at the scheduled time of the class?
It is going to depend on how each faculty member has decided to organize their courses. I think a good majority of them will have face-to-face, what we call synchronous online learning at the same time, which means something like this, where we're all together and we're working together. In some cases, some of the class may be organized asynchronously, where there might be offline work that you do independently before you come back together. What's really important as a reminder is to look closely at your syllabus on day one to understand how your class is being scheduled, and make sure you ask questions so that you really know how this is going to be managed over the course of the semester, because each one could be a little bit different.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Charlie Foss to join us for this next question and have both of you speak to it. Being mostly online makes it feel like the overall student experience is reduced. Is tuition staying the same, and if so, why?
Well, because instruction and related expenses are continuing, it's not appropriate to reduce tuition. And that's not a local decision anyway. That's a Chancellor's Office Board of Trustees decision. Likewise, it's inappropriate to reduce mandatory campus fees except in very limited circumstances. Reducing tuition and mandatory campus fees in the midst of this economic impacts of the pandemic would lead us to employee layoffs. It would adversely affect course availability, academic programs, time to graduation. To ensure that the university can make all our programs and facilities available to students virtually and in person, now and in the future, we need to continue to have this financial support even during this pandemic.
Vin, would you like to add?
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to add to that. One of the very interesting things, and I actually worked in online education before coming to San Jose State University, is this question, is it really less expensive? And the truth is the training, the work that you have to do, we've put a lot of investment into this summer to make the student experience really highly connected. And that goes to not just, we're still gonna have clubs, we're still gonna have activities. Those might be done virtually, but all of that is still available because we want as much of the total student experience. And in the classroom, the faculty are working many hours to prepare to get those classes up online in really high quality ways. And each one of those things takes time and energy and resources. So please understand that while there's an assumption that all of a sudden just going online makes the campus less expensive or teaching less expensive, the truth is, particularly when you're ramping up into it, is almost the opposite case. And so we're doubling down. And as as Charlie has mentioned, our chief financial officer, we've taken money, and even in a budget time, and invested that money into training programs and so forth, and in enhancements to classes this fall that are above and beyond the budget cuts we have to take, because we know we have to invest into the crisis in order to make the teaching and learning experience and the student experience stronger.
Thank you. There's a very similar question to this, and I'll ask Charlie to start again, and then Vin, please add. Are there going to be any campus fee reductions? And if not, why?
So very similar to the answer I just gave. Most of the activities that are happening on campus are going to continue to happen on campus. They might be virtually, but we are going to continue to have things happen. We're looking at SRAC for the pool to open up so that people can swim, student union being open so people can use those facilities. We're looking at ways that we can eventually get the library open as well, even though the library might not today be open, the services and the resources of that library are completely available to our students and our staff.
Thank you. Vin, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, if you look at the overall structure of fees, a lot of it goes to the student success experience. It goes to academic advising. It goes to student support like writing programs and so forth. All of those are still available. They have to be available so that we can continue to provide the holistic learning experience. And the same goes true for the fees that apply to classes. Those classes still have costs. In fact, some of them had costs above and beyond that. And we are taking reserves and resources from our campus and investing those above and beyond what we need right now, above and beyond what we have right now into what we need. So that, I think, demonstrates, when you really look at it, the dollars that are coming in are going back out to provide that holistic experience that a campus needs to have in order for students to be successful.
Thank you.
Hey, Lisa, if you don't mind, if I could jump in with another question that was up on the board there, if I can jump ahead. Campus reserves. People want to, they're looking at how much reserves does the campus have? Can we use reserves in lieu of layoffs? How does all that work? And people will point to an audit that was done a year ago on the CSU system about the amount of reserves that were in the CSU system. Every campus is different. Every campus is operated uniquely. We have on our campus a little over 4 months worth of reserves. That's not a lot of reserves to have on a campus. We are more fortunate than most, and we have a systematic plan to use those reserves over the next 3 years, spending those down that will help us not have to go to the layoff mode, not have us go to the reduction in support of programming and reducing what we're trying to do for our academic mission. So this is a well thought out design plan that we are going to not take all our reserves in the first year, because this is going to be a multi-year problem, but working each year to take reserves down so that we get to only a month or two of reserves by the end of year 3. So, and that as a financial person is a scary place to be, but we're trying to preserve people's jobs, and we're trying to mostly preserve here what's happening with our academic environment.
Thank you, Charlie. I think that's it for Charlie right now. Vin, I have a few more questions for you. Berkeley announced yesterday that they will go fully online. Chancellor Christ stated that they cannot pull off a hybrid system and that Santa Clara County is currently not permitting in-person education. Could you please speak to that announcement?
Yeah, no, it's an important announcement, and what's critical here to understand is this is our plan as of today, and we are definitely in the big picture monitoring everything that's happening both locally and nationally relative to the pandemic. And I would just say in the big picture, Berkeley and San Jose State are different campuses, and we have a plan right now that we believe protects the safety of all the students involved. And as a kind of in response to some questions, if students can't make it to campus for in-person experiences, we're trying to provide remote options relative to those so that every student has access to the curriculum, even if they can't make it to class. So we're working through a lot of different scenarios in order to do things, including managing how many people we believe will be on the campus at any one time. We think because of that, we're able to deliver about 10% of our curriculum in person at some level. I can understand Berkeley's decision to not do that, which may be tied to their inability to really manage effectively which courses would go on. I will tell you that our decisions of which courses were really driven by faculty who are trying to understand the best ways to teach students. And so we feel really comfortable with the plan today. Clearly, we will be monitoring the longer term situation. And if the spike continues through the summer and the fall looks precarious, we may make a different decision. We're clearly communicating as much as possible with everyone in the community if any decisions do change course.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Joanne Wright to join you for this next question. Speaking of teaching, teaching from home increases the burden on faculty, Wi-Fi, electricity, printing. Are there plans to offset that?
Well, that's an interesting question. I know can be mitigation of other things, like transportation might be something that we aren't seeing as much of, or parking fees, that type of thing. But to this direct question of people working from home, I know I get these questions frequently, not infrequently, but there are some ways to help. Faculty are permitted on campus for purposes of delivering and facilitating online teaching. So I do want faculty to remember that. I mean, I would advise that they speak with their chair or their dean to let them know that this is something they would like to do. But if they don't have the equipment or the means, the materials in their home office space to do the best they can do with their online teaching, they can come to their offices on campus. Also, individual departments, if you want to request some equipment or some assistance, that can be made on the department level and the college level. So I would encourage people to do that as well, because each case is different. So, and each department is different. So I would recommend that people consult with their departments and their colleges. And I also just wanted, if I could, I just want to make a point, because I want to go back to what Charlie was saying. I know this is a little out of order, but about the layoff question, the reserve question. So I know that I gave an answer prior, which is basically just outlining the layoff procedure. And really that was just outlining the procedure. But I do want to emphasize, again, what President Papazian spoke of, is that our goal is to deal with the budget challenges while doing our best to protect job stability. So that's what we're going to be focused on. So hopefully, and every campus is different. And while some campuses, as a questioner in the chat there, spoke about CSU doing layoffs, other campuses may be proceeding right now on that. But for the moment, we really are trying to work to protect our employees' job stability here at SJSU.
Thank you, Joanne. Would you like to add anything before I go to Patrick Day, our Vice President for Student Affairs?
I will say the question about, faculty and staff working remotely. We have programs right now for access to equipment that the information technology team has been organizing. Secondarily, myself and the Chief Information Officer, Bob Lim, are collecting data from the colleges about technology needs. So in terms of laptops and webcams and other sorts of things, so that those can be distributed to people to help them do their work more remotely. So we are coming up with a plan. And again, this is another place where, despite a very large budget deficit, the Chief Financial Officer, Charlie Foss, our IT team led by Bob Lim, myself, we're working to invest into this to make sure we can deliver the best quality we can. So each college is really organizing some of those data right now, and we hope to have access to that equipment very soon for people.
Sorry, Vin, before you go, there was a follow-up question that just came in. Patrick, please feel free to say. If Santa Clara County declared no in-person classes, how is SJSU planning to have 10% in person? Isn't this against the guidelines? This decision puts many faculty and staff at risk, particularly technical staff who must serve multiple face-to-face classes. Could you please speak to this?
So the guidelines coming out of the county that apply to K-12 education are different than apply to higher education. So we're given some space, but we are absolutely looking at all scenarios. And if there are cases where faculty and staff can't come to campus because of various risk factors and so forth, we're looking at how to mitigate that and adapt the classes. This is, again, when we created the plan, the 90-10 plan, which was submitted to the Chancellor's office, it was at the beginning of June and in a period of decline. This is where we are today. We will continue to monitor the situation, and it could change given our conversations. Fortunately, we are in a bi-weekly conversation with Santa Clara County public health officials, and they are very much aware of our plans and understand them and have given us feedback on them.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Patrick Day, our Vice President for Student Affairs, for the next set of questions. Patrick, what does enrollment or expected yield for fall look like so far?
Sure. Actually, our enrollment is actually quite strong relative to being in the midst of a global pandemic. And we think that's because students and families still see San Jose State as a really strong opportunity. And so right now, actually our continuing enrollment, the number of students who have been enrolled and are continuing at the university is actually up from this time last year. And we think that our new students coming to the institution are still going to represent the majority of where we set our goals. So we're still going to be a robust campus of close to our 35 or 36,000 students. We'll see some slight declines, and the mix, as Charlie mentioned, will look a little bit different. We'll have some declines in our international students, but overall, our enrollment is strong right now.
Thank you. Next question for you. Will SJSU resume any on-campus student services or activities for the fall?
Right. So I would echo some of the conversation that's been happening. It depends, and it's moving. Right now, we are going to continue what we were doing throughout the spring semester, and quite frankly, what we've moved through and throughout the summer, orienting thousands of students who've gone through our orientation programs. We have a lot of students who are now in some of our summer bridge programs who we're actually engaging virtually. As we go into the fall, we're going to really look at what is going to be the availability of some of our facilities like the student union. It certainly won't look like it looked last year, but will we provide some of those opportunities? Will there be the opportunity to give students a chance to come together in smaller groups? This is all going to depend on county guidance. We may have the building available for students who sometimes take advantage of it to be able to take advantage of the Wi-Fi. And we're going to certainly be looking at what's going to make sense and what is going to be the guidance from the county with regard to SRAC. So I think we're sort of staying loose and staying ready. We would love to be able to provide some of those opportunities. I do not anticipate that it will look like fall of last year, but we are going to consider where there are chances for us to open up and engage, that we provide those spaces for students. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to offer many of both our programs and our services virtually.
Thank you. Could you say a little bit more about SRAC? There was a question that came in. I know you just spoke to this a bit, but I want to make sure everyone heard what you were saying. Is there a possibility that the Spartan Recreation Center will be open for the fall?
So I'd say, is there a possibility? Well, we're certainly holding on to there being a possibility. And keep in mind that that SRAC is a large and diverse complex. So it might be a circumstance where we are opening part of it. We might open the pool for lap swimming versus being able to open the workout spaces. Unlikely we'll be able to open up basketball courts. We are certainly have plans for social distanced workout facilities, weightlifting. So we've already social distanced those in preparation. But again, right now, that's going to depend upon county guidance. So we are ready to go when, one, the county says that's appropriate, but also when we make an assessment and determine that is it's going to be a safe place for our students, faculty, and staff to be able to engage.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Vin to come back for a part of the follow-up that came in about this question. Vin, the question is, what will services in the library be available?
The majority of services in the library are available now. I mean, so what we have is, access to the electronic resources, to the staff in the library, to their expertise and so forth. Obviously, what we haven't given people direct access to are the spaces of the library. And that means that, computer labs and things like that have not been available. We're looking at a phased plan of what it would be to open up and which places to open up. We're also looking at strategies to get people access to the collections and so forth. The National Libraries Associations, various associations have said, though, circulating books should be held back 72 hours before they're redistributed again. So some of the things that we've done, which is like faculty who drop books off and then have students come in and take them, it's going to be harder to do some of that and meet those national standards right now. So there will be some shifts, but we've even got lockers set up outside where books could be placed and dropped off and people can come get them when they need them. So the library is being very responsive to the overall needs of the community. And we're looking at what is the potential to have some space open for students in the fall, students and faculty in the fall. But again, that's going to be in conversation with the city of San Jose, because we share that library with the city, as well as Santa Clara Public Health.
Vin, before you go away, a follow-up question came in. Since the San Jose Public Library is our partner, how can we be sure of any reported COVID cases that could affect the SJSU community and vice versa?
It's a great question. And we're working right now. We had a fantastic meeting with Santa Clara Public Health the other day about contact tracing and reporting and so forth. And so I think we're in the middle of those conversations of how that information can most effectively circulate. And so I don't have a direct answer to that question immediately, but to say that we've taken all the steps to set up the opportunity to be able to do that work.
Thank you very much. To keep moving us along and make sure we get through as many questions as possible, I'm going to ask Joanne Wright, our Senior Associate Vice President for University Personnel, to join us. And I might just say here, if we don't get to answer all the questions that have come in through the registration portal or through the Q&A chat, we will be sure to post answers to those questions on the Health Advisory's website. But Joanne, first question, will testing be mandated in order for employees to work on campus?
Okay, so as of today, testing is not mandated in order for employees to work on campus. That being said, however, students and employees who are living and are working on campus are encouraged to be tested once a month per Santa Clara County Public Health Department guidance. So testing can be done through an individual's primary care provider as well as through one of several free county testing sites. And to locate those testing sites, the website is sccfreetest.org.
Great, thank you. What kind of testing will SJSU provide, if any, to employees?
Okay, again, as of today, we are not providing testing. Now, there's some requirements to run tests. So, and the CDC is not recommending mass testing for universities at this time. They have to be done frequently, likely daily or weekly, to provide the most information. Currently, the volume of testing in our area is leading to a longer turnaround time for results. And again, doing frequent mass testing of asymptomatic workers would impact this. And being able to get results for prioritized persons, such as people in hospitals or nursing facilities or close contacts, that would be, again, a priority for those tests.
Well, can you tell us, will there be accommodation for staff who can't come to campus to work because their children have virtual school?
Right, so anyone who may need to discuss possible leaves, and that's whether full-time, partial, or intermittent due to childcare issues, should reach out to our leaves program manager. His name is Josh Etherington. The CSU CPAL leave program, just to remind everybody, is in effect through December 31st, 2020, as is the federal FFRCA program, which I call FFICRA. So please do not hesitate to discuss options with our leaves manager. There may be opportunities in addition to this for flexibility with schedules, and this should be discussed with managers and employee relations.
Okay, very similar question. What happens if employees are sent home with symptoms but don't have sick time?
Okay, our goal is to protect the health and safety of our campus community, and we would work with our employees who may be sent home for COVID-related reasons and who are concerned with their leave time. So as noted above, there are COVID-specific leave programs available in addition to our regular leave programs. So employees may be eligible for those. Again, it comes down to discussing with us what options are available. But again, main goal, protect the health and safety of our campus community. So we will work with people.
Follow-up question to this is, could an employee be disciplined if he or she checks for symptoms and needs to stay home, but doesn't have that sick time available?
Right, so we do understand that there may be individual situations that we need to address, and we would be working again on case by case, looking at specifics of each case to understand how best to work with employees and their units. Again, maintaining our goal of protecting health and safety of everybody concerned.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Tracy Fertilage, our Senior Associate Vice President for Facilities Development and Operations, to speak to this next question with you, and I'll have Tracy start. How will the face covering requirement be enforced?
Sure, thank you, Lisa. Our main goal is to protect the health and safety of our campus community. The face coverings are mandated at this time by the state. Earlier, I spoke to those requirements specifically as related to ensuring that one wears a mask when one is inside of buildings, unless you're in a private office. And then also that you need to wear a face covering when you're outside and may not be able to maintain 6 feet of distance from others. We ask that our campus community come together to respect the public health requirements currently in place so that we can protect ourselves and one another. Should there be a situation where a community member is not respecting or is appearing to not respect the mandate, we're going to have to address that on a case-by-case basis. And remember that there are also instances where an individual may not be able to wear a mask. So we also need to be conscious and kind to one another with regard to that. Those reasons, if you were to say, report somebody for not wearing a mask, we would not necessarily tell you the reason why that person was not wearing a mask due to privacy concerns. However, we do expect and trust that folks on campus will follow the mandate and that we will take all steps that we can as individuals to protect one another.
Thank you. Joanne, would you like to add anything to Tracy's response? Tracy, stay right there.
No, I think that was a great response. And again, we are a community. We're in this together, and we do expect and trust that people will respect that this is mandated. It's really, really important for us to protect ourselves and protect each other. You know, we want to work to protect that safe and healthy of everybody in our community. So hopefully everyone will, you know, respond to that and wear the face mask as required.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question that involves both of you and the provost, so I'm going to ask Vin to join us again. Follow-up question is, those staff who have to run facilities for the courses that are meeting face-to-face are put at greater risk. In some cases, there are as many as 15 courses running face-to-face for a particular facility. If cases continue to rise at this rate, will the option for online only be considered? Then I'd like to.
Sure, I'll jump on this. Let me say that the option to move back to fully online for 100% of our courses has always been considered. And as of today, we feel that the schedule we have makes a lot of sense and that we can protect the safety of everyone involved based on the schedule. But we are monitoring the situation, and if it demands change, we can make change. Fortunately, because of this summer, every single college has plans of what it would take to remove those final 10% and move them back to online education. So it is not inconceivable that we could do that before the term begins. But right now, as of today, the schedule we have is what we think makes the most sense for meeting the expectations of our students and their learning demands relative to what we know about the pandemic.
Thank you. Joanne, if you don't have anything to add to that, I'm going to go to Tracy's set of questions. Thank you, Ben.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, will ventilation improve when people have to go back to campus for work?
That's a great question, and I'm glad it was asked. We are working very hard to improve ventilation in our buildings wherever possible. That includes increasing the percentage of outside air that's circulating through a building, increasing the number of air changes per hour, and also improving the filtration in our filter banks where it's possible and compatible with the system. The answer to this issue is not a simple one, because we also have to continue to ensure that the ventilation system is effective and that we maintain a comfortable environment. Toward that end, we continue to work with the CSU Mechanical Review Board and with the mechanical engineers to evaluate each of our buildings and systems, certainly focused on those that will have the highest density in the fall, and ensuring that we are doing everything we can to maximize the ventilation system, as well as considering improvements that can be made to continue to improve those systems.
Thank you. And then quickly, if you could answer these next two questions, and then we'll go to some questions about for Dr. Foo about exposure. What kind of cleaning is SJSU doing on campus, classrooms and offices? Is it the same for all colleges, or is it determined individually? So actually that was two questions. And then here's a third. Yeah. Will SJSU provide personal protective equipment to employees?
Sure. Let me take that second question first, because I think that's a quicker answer. And the answer is certainly. We will be providing PPE and cleaning supplies throughout the campus. You'll find that there will be locations as you return to the campus where you can obtain those supplies. In addition, you'll be able to ask for specific supplies that you need from FD&O. Will deliver them to you. And then within our classrooms and labs and other locations across campus, you'll actually find stations where these types of products are available to you. So this is very important to us, and we intend to be responsive. With regard to cleaning, certainly we are cleaning like crazy. We've been cleaning like crazy all summer long, and that will continue. I can tell you that we will continue to maintain the level of cleaning that you see across the campus generally, but as the course schedule and return to work plans become approved, we are also focusing our efforts on ensuring that we are covering the spaces that will be occupied to a higher level by fully sanitizing frequently touched surfaces, and depending on the use of the space, often more than once a day, several times a day.
Thank you, Tracy. The next set of questions is for Dr. Barbara Foo, our acting medical director. Dr. Foo, when should I expect to hear something if I have been exposed or might have been exposed to the virus?
Currently, any exposures are notified as soon as possible. To decrease the spread of this virus, the goal is to notify any persons of exposures as soon as the university identifies them.
Thank you. I might just say here, I realize that it is 10:04. So for those of you who are waiting for your questions to be answered, if we are unable to get to all of your questions, we will be sure to answer them on the Health Advisory's website, the Adapt FAQ page. And also, I see that there are some comments about questions that are specific for parents. There will be an upcoming town hall specifically for parents on August 7th, and more information will be available about that shortly. So Dr. Foo, back to you. How and when will we be communicated with about future COVID cases on campus?
Well, as of today, the number of cases in confirmed university members is on the SJSU Health Advisory's website. Specifically, this information can be found on the Report a Case page within the SJSU Health Advisories.
Great, thank you. And can you say a little bit about what constitutes someone being exposed to the virus?
Yeah, both the CDC and the Santa Clara Public Health Department define a close contact as someone who has been within 6 feet of a person who has tested positive and for at least 15 minutes.
Thank you. And one final question for you, and then I'm going to invite our provost back to answer some questions about exposure in the class setting. How will contact tracing be done without exposing someone to someone who has tested positive?
Yeah, well, when the university communicates to someone who has a possible exposure, no information about the person who has tested positive is released. What is given is instructions on what to do and how to access resources. But any information about the person who has tested positive is kept confidential.
Great, thank you, Dr. Foo. Vin, could you rejoin us to answer some questions about classes? And Dr. Foo, stand by, please, in case there's anything specific that you can help us with. Vin, what happens if someone in an in-person class is exposed or may have been exposed? Will the class be moved online, and if so, for how long?
Each one of those cases has to really be taken on an individual basis. You know, if we're using the standard protocols, if we're moving people in and out of classrooms so that they're not exposed too often in general and so forth, then it may be okay. But in many cases, we may have to move the class online temporarily and quarantine the group until we know for sure whether or not anyone else has been exposed.
Thank you. How will SJSU change attendance requirements so that students who become ill can self-quarantine for 2 or more weeks without consequences?
You know, each and every faculty member is being asked to be as flexible as possible as they were in the spring with student attendance and so forth. Also, a lot of programming is being simultaneously made remotely available. So that even in lab experiences, those are being taped and broadcast so that if students have to stay home or have concerns and need to self-quarantine, whether or not they are ill or not, they'll have access to the material. And obviously in times when students are really sick, we have makeup policies as well as the potential for incompletes. No one will be penalized for having to be out sick in a class.
Okay, thank you, Vin. I know you've answered this question or you've spoken to this in an earlier part of the town hall, but in case folks didn't hear the answer, could you please answer it again? F1 students can now take fully online classes. Can they take them from their home country? If so, will their visas be affected?
Any student can take classes from their home country, and as of now, their visa status will not be affected.
Okay, and a follow-up question. As an international student, how many units do I need for fall 2020?
An F1 student needs to maintain at least 9 units as a graduate student and 12 units as an undergraduate student in order to maintain their visa status. If you're a brand new student, you're taking online, you won't need an F1 visa in the fall. If we're open and you're coming in the spring, you will need to then have the F1 visa to be here in the spring.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Patrick Day, our Vice President from Student Affairs. Patrick, what will happen if students who have to take hybrid classes can't find housing in San Jose. Will there be financial support for them?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think it's how can we find ways to accommodate? I think it's going to depend on some individual situations, and I think we're going to, if students are in that situation, I'd want to talk to them individually to see if there are ways that we can provide some support through SJSU Cares, or if they have an individual situation that through the financial aid process we might be able to provide some assistance with. So it's hard to have a broad answer, but we're going to have lots of individual situations, and we're going to be happy to talk to students if the dynamic gets a little tricky, and we need to see if there's a way that we can accommodate those students.
Okay, and then Patrick, I'm going to ask one last set of questions that has multiple parts. Okay, so if SJSU were to move to phase 4 midway through a semester, how would the school accommodate students who aren't able to afford or find housing? Maybe I should stop there.
So, there's a few elements to that. Certainly, we're going to do whatever we can if we need to provide housing for students to be able to do it. Our plan only calls for us an occupancy rate of about 50%, which is going to leave us room if we have to be flexible at some level. But we also will work with students to figure out if there are configurations, if we were to move in the middle of a semester, if there's configurations that might help them to be able to be on campus or work with partners off of the campus to try and help facilitate them finding places to be and places to live or roommates to have. So I think it would be a challenge to make that move, but we do this all the time and working with individual students who may be trying to shift in the middle of a semester. And so students need to contact our housing office, and we will do our best to accommodate.
Thank you, Patrick. We know that spring 2021 housing priority is being given to students who are in housing for spring 2020. Will the same priority be extended to incoming freshmen who applied for housing but also had to cancel for safety reasons? I think the person may have meant fall 2020.
Right. So right now, as of July 23rd, right now that priority is for students who are current residents. But what we're anticipating is that we'll be able to accommodate new students coming in the spring. I mean, we've been thinking about that and talking about students, and so we think we will be able to accommodate a large number of students who may be interested in a spring housing who aren't going to be here in the fall. So even though they aren't on the priority list at the moment, we do think that we won't have a challenge accommodating them. And again, something that we do on a regular basis. This is obviously a little bit different. And so we're going to be as flexible as we can to try and get all of those students who want housing in some form of housing.
Thank you. And then one last question about housing. Do you anticipate, you spoke to this a bit, do you anticipate students will be able to apply for housing for spring 2021 if the number of in-person classes are increased significantly?
Will they be able to apply? Oh, absolutely. No question about it. Again, we've targeted 50% for the fall. And so that, we will obviously have some availability. And so we will certainly be open and available for the spring. And so, yes, students will absolutely be able to apply. We know that some students are planning on joining us in January. And so we recognize that as well. And we do think we will be able to accommodate a large number of students.
Thank you, Patrick. This concludes our Q&A session for this town hall. As I mentioned previously, because we were unable to answer all the questions that were submitted in advance and the questions that came in through the chat in real time, we will find answers to the questions and post them on the SJSU Adapt website. There will be an FAQ there. Also, we realized that there are some questions that came in from parents, and we will be hosting a parent-specific town hall on August 7th. More information about this town hall will be posted at the website on the screen shortly. And at this time, I'd like to turn the mic back over to President Papazian to close out this town hall.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to all of you for those very important and thoughtful questions. We are really trying to give you the best information we have at this time, and we'll continue to share as things change and evolve. So please do check the SJSU Adapt website as frequently as possible. We will continue with additional town halls, and those we have announced, and those are also listed on the website. Again, just to remind everybody, this is a very robust, we are a very robust, resilient community looking after each other, committed to really providing the best learning experience for our students in an environment that protects the health and safety of our faculty and staff as well. So continue to share your concerns, your questions, and we'll continue to try to respond to as many of them as possible. And thank you for spending the time with us this morning.